Well, good afternoon and welcome everybody. I am Justin Benson. I'm VP of Sales for the Americas for SafeNet, and I'm here today with Dave DeMillo, who is a principal consultant of ours, dialing in, and then Dale Hopkinson, one of our sales engineers. And per the agenda, we're here to discuss software licensing, how to boost software profits, and improve your licensing and entitlement best practices. I'm glad you could join us today, and let's jump right in. First of all, I'm going to cover just a little bit of background on who SafeNet is. We are a leader in anti-piracy and IP protection. We've been around since 1983. We basically focus in on protecting software, helping you manage your software and your licenses through our entitlement management solutions, and providing solutions for the ever-evolving SaaS market. There's certainly some interchangeability between our solutions, but those are the three major areas that we focus upon today. We have approximately 25,000 customers spread around the globe. We're absolutely a global country and have many customers in Asia, EMEA, as well, of course, as the Americas. We do approximately $450 to $500 million in revenue, making us around about the fourth largest security company. And really in our space, we like to think of ourselves as the leader, because the other companies that are larger than us are companies like Symantec, Trend Micro, and McAfee before the acquisition, and they focus on a slightly different area, although we all come under the security banner. So that's some background on us. What I'm going to do is hand it over to Dave DeMillo, who again is our principal consultant. Dave spent many years working for ISVs, some of the largest ISVs, including most recently with the division within IBM, and joined our team a little over a year ago and works with many of our customers and prospects around defining best practices. So with that, Dave, I think I'll hand it over to you. You'll hear from me at the end. I'll come back to manage the Q&A session, so submit questions whenever you like, and we'll get to them at the end. But with that, let me hand it over to you, Dave.
Thank you, sir. So welcome, everyone. Again, my name's Dave DeMillo. I head up consulting for SafeNet, and essentially what my job is I work with our customers and prospects to really help them get a plan together with respect to their licensing and that licensing transformation. So, again, my game is all around planning and helping our customers understand the things that they're going to need to get done, when they need to do them, and so forth, to put a solid plan together to meet their goals. So what happens, though, as many of you may be feeling and seeing already, is that there are a lot of minefields in this business, right? It's a little arcane, it's kind of a niche space, but sometimes not knowing the right rocks to look under can be a problem down the road and so forth. So, again, what I do is I try to smooth those things out and paint a nice smooth picture and go forward plan for our customers. So a lot of times, teams will come to me and they're not really sure where to start. I mean, I see this all the time where we have customers saying, yeah, we need more control over our software usage. We know we've got all kinds of little small buckets of information. It's not really anybody's job internally to pull all this stuff together. So we know we have a lot of information. It's probably going to be more work than we thought, and we just need to know where to get started and so forth. So a lot of times I get that sort of confused dog look to start with. So, and one of the things that I try to stress to teams first starting out in license management is that our clients in particular often think that they have a technical problem, right? They say, well, we want more control in the software, so therefore this is going to be a development project, and there's some good software out there to realize those capabilities. So that's generally how a lot of our prospects find us, right? They think they've got a technical problem, but in reality, it really comes down to more of a business integration challenge at the end of the day, because focus on technology in this particular space usually doesn't go all that well if you're really just focusing on the bits and the bytes other than the people who have to use your software. And so we're going to take a look at a few examples of what I mean by that. But if there's something I really want to stress today, it's process over technology, because you're talking about people using your products and making sure that they have a good experience in using it. It's not just about integrating technology into your tools and locking things down to certain pieces of hardware. So let's keep going here. So if you look at this chart, what I've done is I've listed out about 13 or so things that a leader of any licensing project is going to have to deal with at some level, right? Even if it's very high level and didn't give it a whole lot of thought. Generally, there's the thought process of starting at a strategy of what are we trying to do, putting together some requirements, then getting into the technology, actually starting to build some code, and eventually rolling that stuff out. But what happens in the licensing space is that, in my experience, is that there's a certain gravity that teams take, right, towards the technical pieces along this continuum here, right? It's, a lot of our customers, again, come to us saying, all right, well, we know we need some controls, so show us what your product does, and let's start to, look at your code and your toolkit and get that stuff rolling. But again, what happens here is that the items on the right-hand side of this chart really are the things that can make or break a licensing implementation. It's getting a really crisp picture of what you're really trying to achieve, what the model looks like, what does that customer experience look like from the time they order something from you through the fulfillment process and license activation. And it's really about the process of ensuring that you have all the right licensing use cases and solid customer experience that generally will make or break an implementation. It's not how well the bits and bytes work under the covers per se. It's really, the crux of it comes down to people and process. And I'm going to say it till I'm blue in the face because I've seen it over and over and over, and I truly believe it. And so what we try to do here at SafeNet is try to help our customers get that overall plan together, keep them from, just generally gravitating towards the technology alone. So, I started to put some thought around why software licensing tends to be a gray area for some businesses and some teams, and why the licensing projects kind of get out of hand sometimes. And what I came up with is really, if you think about it, on the right-hand side of this chart, you see three silos within a company that are generally grouped together, right? You've got product management, they work closely with development and customer support from a technical perspective. And it's easy for those three silos to grab a hold of the notion of license enforcement, saying, okay, what do we have to put in the product, and really look at it as a product development project, okay? But the rub comes on the left-hand side, where there generally needs to be a back office component that's integrated into the ordering system so that when a customer buys something, all the right things happen and trickle down through the system, so it generates the right piece of information that ends up getting consumed by the license enforcement on the right-hand side. So the issue for a lot of companies is that these two worlds don't necessarily live all that well together, meaning there usually aren't too many people that really understand the development and product management pieces of the business that also understand the back office enough so that you can put a project plan together to make the two worlds live comfortably together. And I realize I'm speaking in generalities. It's not always the case for every customer, but generally the larger the company, if they're you live in bigger and more concrete silos. So it's usually hard to find one person who can speak both languages, right, to really understand what happens in the back office and fulfillment side of the house, what all those use cases are for ordering and fulfillment, and also exactly how things are going to work on the product side so that so all the technology sort of comes together. Okay, and so what we do at SafeNet in the consulting space here is, again, try to embrace both pieces, try to, we work with our customers to bring the right people together so that we have an all-encompassing plan for the license enforcement piece as well as the back office, and put together a vision that's well integrated. Okay, because what I usually find that teams are missing when they either start to implement licensing or get to the point where they realize it's really hard is that they're sort of missing what that end vision is going to be. Okay, how do all the pieces fit together from back office to the activation on the customer side? How does the technology talk back and forth to the back office component? Which things do each of the teams need to do to make sure that you've got the right plan together, and so forth. So from the consulting side within SafeNet, one of the things that we really strive towards, since we are so customer focused as a company, is making sure that we've got the right plans and the right vision. And when I say we, meaning together with our customers. And the way we generally do this, and I would encourage anyone who's either doing this on their own or whether you're doing it with SafeNet or not, is to make sure that you broach your licensing project as a team sport and put together planning workshops where you have people from all those different silos that I talked about before between back office and on the engineering side, and get all the variables on the table. And if you're not sure what those are, we can certainly help you with that, and that's part of what we do. So in the SafeNet planning workshops, what I generally start to do is work with our customers really at the top and try to help them take a look at how they're selling products and how they're going to market and how they want to be selling. Do they really want more controls in their products? Do they want less control? Do their sales reps want more latitude or less latitude? Generally, looking at licensing at the sales model level is very fruitful, because if you ask sales executives, they have a very, they generally have a very pointed and simplified and a very, very good view of the world and how they want to really be able to talk to their customers and sell goods. So that's where we like to start, and then really try to understand from our customers, how their operation mechanics work, what happens when their customers place an order, what are all the different use cases, how do they want to deliver to their customers, what do they want that customer experience to be, as a first-time customer, as an add-on customer, during upgrades, during trade-ins from product to product, and so forth. So we really try to, again, look at this puzzle from the perspective of your customers interacting with you, and what do you want that experience to be. And then from that, then we try to, map our technology to those use cases. But generally, again, I find that it's a very helpful thing to start at the top, look at how you really want to deliver to your customers, what do you really want that customer experience to be, which things do you care about, which things do you not care about, and then put a solution in place that will serve those needs. So I'm going to keep going here.
Hey, Dave, I got one question on that. So a question was, somebody who currently owns EMS and RMS and wants to integrate it into Microsoft's CRM system. And previously they'd worked just with RMS. and integrate that directly into Microsoft CRM. They were told at that point in time that to do the integration, you have to work with a partner, and wondering if that's still true, or if we have services today that could help them integrate EMS into the CRM system.
Yeah, we definitely have services that can help. At the end, I believe, Holger, you get some contact information from us, from both a planning and an execution/implementation perspective. SafeNet offers those types of services, absolutely.
Okay, thanks.
Yeah, no worries. So, again, a lot of times what happens, again, we'll work with our customers to really understand what they're trying to achieve, what those core use cases are, how they want to deliver, what they want their customer experiences to be, and so forth. And then I'll go back and I'll put together what I call a vision for them, right? To help them paint that mental picture of how the order workflow is going to work, how the customers are going to interact with them, and so forth. And usually when I do that, when our teams do that, the skies kind of open up at that point, and they say, oh yeah, this is exactly what we want. And at that point, they get a much clearer feel and a picture of how the overall project will be structured and work out for them. So from a consulting perspective, these are the types of services we offer. Now, I included this chart from Cisco, which I think is an excellent chart, and it sort of proves one of the points that I was trying to make earlier around process versus technology. So this is Cisco's chart. I didn't touch it. It's a native chart that they developed, and their license management, their technology is just one of these little cylinders. But in Cisco's eyes, and I think they've got the right perspective, their licensing, in quotation fingers, doesn't work until all of these things work together, right? So again, it's not about just baking technology into the product. It's about making sure all the processes around that technology are working, from ordering through manufacturing, through customer service and fulfillment, and being able to help the customer afterwards. It all has to work together. Okay. Okay, I'll spend just a couple minutes on this. We've got plenty of good stories over the past few years around the outputs, the outcomes of some of our workshops where we've heard very positive things in helping our customers get to that next step. One of the stories I want to share is I was working with a customer last year sometime, and initially, they were very product focused, and they couldn't understand why I kept, asking them about process. And at the end of 2 days, the guy ended up, coming up to me and saying, look, when you started, I thought all these process discussions were just a bit silly and weren't going to get us anywhere. But now I realize they're exactly the things that we needed, and those are exactly the conversations that we needed to have, and we didn't have them. Now we've had them. We've got a much clearer plan and picture of how we want things to work. So that's sort of what I do. That's what SafeNet strives towards, again, is to try to help our customers paint that big picture and get comfortable with the overall project. A couple other wins for us as far as our workshops and planning services. I was working with one of the companies in the UK, and we started, and by the time the workshop was over, they actually identified 4 different ways where SafeNet can help them go to market, simply because we went through the exercise of including their sales teams and saying, how do you really want to sell products? What are the types of conversations you want to have with your customers around delivering goods and so forth? And once we were able to harvest some of those ideas, we put a plan together to let them go to market in 4 ways that they never thought they were going to. So things like that, I think, is where we really add value. And you can read through these charts, and there's a few other nice stories in here as well. Okay, the next piece of the chart talk about how one company dealt with the problem that they had of having a clunky back office system with a very manual license key generation system. They've been in the licensing technology business for, they'd used license enforcement for a number of years, but the back office systems were very archaic, if you will. So let's take a closer look. So the original state here is that, the company was very well established, over $500,000 in revenue and 120 or so software products. But they had 3 unique licensing technologies. A couple of them were proprietary, one was a commercial one. And the key thing on this chart is that they had 13 people who did nothing but help their customers worldwide generate their license keys. So it's 50% of all the keys that they generated were done manually, meaning the customer received the box after their purchase, and they either had to call this team or send an email with the right information, and they had agents who received the email, parsed it, and so forth, and used their local license generation tools to do that fulfillment. So it's all fine and good. Looks a little expensive here, 13 people worldwide. But when you step back and you look at it, and you took a look at what it was actually costing, right? So the tools themselves and keeping those things up and running cost this company about $325,000 a year or so forth. But they were paying $1.3 million just in headcount to generate license keys. So 80% of the cost of their entire licensing project was in people. Okay, so they wanted to get better at that and decided that we're going to put a plan together to automate the back office. Let's clean it up. Let's move all the license generation to a single, scalable, sexy customer-facing web portal where the customers can log in, help themselves to it, generate their own license keys, do their own activations, and they don't necessarily have to pick up the phone. And on the back end, this company didn't necessarily have to have a person get in the way of every license key transaction. So at the end of the day, what happened after putting this platform into place is they were able to reduce headcount by 38% in the first couple of years, simply by, again, putting more of that control and automation into place. And not only was able to reduce costs, but by implementing or delivering the customer-facing web portal, they had a much nicer customer experience as well. So it was cheaper and faster and delivered a better experience. Okay? So again, they moved from a manual process, very clunky, very old school, to a single scalable platform that supported all those different technologies, customer self-service, very customer-facing. But the big payoff came a couple years later, where that same company acquired four smaller companies, where each of those companies had their own licensing technology. So what happened was that because they had a scalable, very customer-friendly portal and system in place, instead of having to deal with those manual processes for those other 4 companies, they were able to migrate those technologies into that one scalable platform that we were talking about. So they moved all of those technologies into that web portal and ended up not having to consume the 14 people that those 4 companies had who were also manually generating keys. So what does this all mean? Okay, so had this company done nothing, had they continued manual license key generation, not really having any automation involved, they would have potentially been employing about 27 people. Granted, I think that number's probably in the high end, but but they were looking at employing 27 people, over $3 million in headcount every year in that particular cost, where the actual performance was somewhere in the order of $1 million in headcount because they were able to consolidate, put more of control in the customer's hands, deliver a clean customer experience, and really bank on automation and customer self-fulfillment. Okay, quite a big difference. Okay, so the lesson here again is by introducing a self-service, entitlement, customer fulfillment portal, they reduced headcount by 66% over the course of 4 years, delivered a single customer experience, even though it was among 4 different technologies. The things were scalable, and they were able to absorb multiple acquisitions moving ahead at a very reasonable cost. Okay, good planning, good thought process, and it ends up paying off for this particular customer. Okay, so let's talk about what a scalable back end with automation is and consolidation and all that happy stuff. So what does this actually mean, right? And I usually have this discussion in the context of what it means to various stakeholders across the customer enterprise, right? Where IT folks, they want one back office system to manage multiple technologies if you have them. They simply want to do things one way. They don't want to have to support multiple systems, multiple databases, multiple sets of processes. IT folks, they generally want to do things one way. It's all good. Operations people, the folks that have to deal with enabling part numbers and so forth, they simply want consistency, single tool for defining license models and all those definitions and so forth. Certainly the end users want one place to go, so whether you bought product A or product Z and whether they use different technologies and so forth, they want one place and they want consistency, which is certainly the theme throughout the rest of this chart, right? And looking at product management, having worked in product management, having the ability to understand what your customers are using, what they've activated, what they have not activated, is an enormous value add. Okay, so what does this system look like in terms of SafeNet? Is our EMS licensing back office tool, where if this web presentation software supported animation, you would see that we have a nice clean user experience from an order going into the ERP, automatically flowing down to EMS. The customer gets notified. They can do an activation either over the web or through their application software that automatically talks back to EMS. It's a very clean system, one way to do business. It supports multiple licensing technologies, so whether you have homegrown or another commercial technology, that can all sit sort of below EMS, which is also a role-based tool. So different sets of users can have different permissions. So product managers can have one way of getting usage information and activation information across the product line. Support and sales folks can have different views into EMS to be able to better support their customers. Also, EMS supports a partner, has a partner portal to give partners, various levels of control, whether you have a single tier or multi-tier type of distribution models. Okay, so it's a very clean way of doing business, as opposed to the use case we looked at previously with the initial state. Okay. So the other thing I wanted to touch on today, shifting gears a little bit, is to share some experiences I've had around implementations that have gone well versus implementations that necessarily haven't gone well. And typically, if I look at implementations that have been challenged, if you will, they generally fall into three different buckets, right? It's that the project itself kind of focused on the wrong things, where I've seen licensing projects that start out as a development project or simply an IT project. They didn't really focus on the customer, didn't really focus on the user experience, and they simply let I don't want to offend any IT guys on the phone, but they let the IT guys drive the project and define a user experience, and it just didn't work all that well. One of the other major problems that I see is the lack of ownership or expertise within the project team, right? So licensing, as many of you may see or feel, it can be sort of in the middle of this big Venn diagram regarding your organization, where it's not always clear who should own the licensing project, because it does touch so many different places across your business, right? It does touch IT, it touches customer service, it touches your product teams, it touches fulfillment, and I encourage anybody to define an owner for your licensing project that can try to talk all those different languages, or at least bring the right people together and plan the project accordingly. So another major problem that I've seen is that the customers aren't necessarily prepared for the impact that the license enforcement project can have on the customers if it's not planned well, put it that way, right? So inadequate business process planning can lead to clunky processes, which can lead to unhappy customers, which can lead to a lot of unhappy customer calls. So I've seen those things contribute to overall projects sort of going awry. So let's talk about what I would recommend for anyone either overhauling a licensing implementation or initializing one, right? And the first thing I recommend is have a clear internal owner. Have somebody own the project, make it their job if you have to make the project successful, get help when you need it and so forth. I've seen a lot of these projects, because licensing touches so many different silos, right? Try to take on these projects as in a team type environment, right? So it's project ownership by committee, because each silo has their vested interest, right? Each stakeholder has their vested interest. But if there isn't somebody sitting at the top who really owns the overall project and is responsible for its overall success, things can kind of get a little loose, okay? And the next few things, between having well-defined licensing philosophies and policies, meaning really try to understand what you're trying to put in place, what the business drivers are, what things are really important to your business as far as license enforcement goes, making sure a customer can't run the product when they don't have a license key. That may not be a good thing for you, right? So there's always the set of policies that go in place, and deciding as a company what your philosophy is going to be around compliance versus piracy versus, what happens when my customer is down, what do I do? Those types of things are hugely important to a successful licensing implementation, and it's important to have those things well defined so that your support people, that your salespeople, even your customers understand what those policies are. Number 3 here is focus on your users, and focus on your users. What are your use cases? Try to understand all of those use cases, and it's not just the customer buys one thing and implements it or activates it and it's done. Maybe that's the case for some, but generally there are a lot more. There's a lot more, hairy use cases than you may think, and if you don't have your eyes wide open, some of those use cases can get a little complex, right? And the types of things I'm talking about are, upgrades and customers moving licenses or license keys from machine to machine. Maybe you have a sales model that supports site licensing or all-you-can-eat licensing, and what happens when those entitlements move from place to place and so forth. So, this area generally isn't rocket science, but it's a matter of, again, keeping your eyes wide open and trying to understand all the different use cases, get them written down. Even if you don't have the answers to how you address them all, having a pretty robust set of use cases is absolutely critical. So next thing, number 4 here, is on your data quality. Activations and license enforcement, generally the data-driven type of environment where the license keys or the activations, they're relying on accurate data in the back office that represent what your customer bought, when they bought it, how many they bought, what their maintenance status is, and so forth. So, focus on the quality of your data. If you're not sure what your customers bought, if you can't look at your customer records and really understand what they bought and when they bought it, wiring license enforcement into that is probably going to expose that problem rather than help it. So, so many times when we do initial licensing implementations, I try to stress to our customers again to focus on the data quality, and there have been plenty of cases where the customer ends up going through a very detailed data cleanup effort in order to make sure those records are reasonably accurate before rolling out license enforcement into it, because again, the enforcement can expose those types of shortcomings, right? So a data cleanup effort, although it could be time consuming, and I won't lie to you, it can be painful, it's usually very fruitful. Number 5, never ever lose sight of your customers. Understand that your customers have to interact with you. They have to make a purchase, they have to consume goods, and then there are people on the other end of those products that have to do those activations and so forth. So focus on your customer experience, your user experience, what they're actually receiving from you out of the box when you place an order. What do they get? Do they get a nice, well-formatted email that gives them a good experience, that sets good expectations as far as how to download the software, how to do the license activation, where to go for help, what happens if they need some help, are there good online resources, and so forth. What are those expectations? Never lose sight of your customers. And then just a couple other things here is that a good licensing implementation will have quality business analytics associated with it. So I always recommend, from time to time, make sure that you're generating those reports out of your licensing system so you understand that you can get a clear picture of what you're selling, what's been activated, really what's happening in your customers' accounts, and conduct annual business reviews, at least once a year or so. And by that, I really recommend, particularly for the larger customers, engaging your senior salespeople. Right? In general, most of our customers will implement a license enforcement system to help drive sales, right? To help protect revenue and help drive sales. And it's really, it's important to, as the person who perhaps owns the licensing project, to understand from your salespeople whether your implementation is doing the job or not. Okay? If your goal is to protect revenue, and your sales leaders say, you know what, if you took license enforcement out, I would not make my number, quarter to quarter, then you probably, you know that it's effective, you know that it's meeting your goals and so forth. Okay, get in the ears of your sales folks. Ask them if it's doing the job. Is it protecting revenue? Do you find that customers are buying more software because you have better controls? Or is it just causing a lot of friction? Okay, I can't stress the point enough of having at least once a year have a conversation with your senior sales folks to really understand whether or not your license enforcement is doing the job, and where you could be either turning the screws a little tighter, or maybe you have to loosen them up. Okay, because those types of conversations matter. All right. So, Justin. So I'm complete with. Excuse me. I'm finished with my section of the presentation. I think we're going to hold questions off to the end, right?
Yeah, we'll hold questions. If you have questions specifically for Dave's section, feel free to add them at any time during the discussion. You don't have to wait till the end, but we'll tackle the majority of the questions. And now we're going to hand it over to Dale, who's going to get into more of a product-specific discussion for the next few slides. Dale, you ready to go?
I'm ready. Hi, good afternoon, everyone. Thanks again for joining. So as David just mentioned, we kind of went through most of the business side and the process level stuff. David mentioned definitely the licensing is a problem, more really process over technology. But once you do get to the technology phase, you will definitely want to make sure you have a complete software licensing solution. A complete solution really allows you to develop and also really make it easy to develop those 7 habits that Dave just mentioned. You should have included strong IP protection. The protection ideally should be separate from license functionality. Really, it should be role-based, allowing you to have a clear internal owner. It allows for reporting so that license stats can be measured, allowing you to harvest the valuable business analytics that Dave had just mentioned is very useful for those annual business reviews that you'll definitely want to hold. And most importantly, it offers flexible licensing. Really allows you to focus on the use case, as Dave he mentioned, repetitiously. Really, the flexible licensing allows you to meet the needs of the field without exhausting your engineering resources. So the slide here is just kind of giving that depiction. You can have that separation of protection from licensing. Of course, the product manager or the business team go ahead and define those license models, whether it's pre-release or even on the fly. And of course, the flexibility. You can define the kind of key you're going to use, the hardware key, software key, and of course your delivery method. So really just getting to the heart of what we're talking about today, the licensing models. Choosing the right licensing models. As David mentioned, really focusing on the use case. This really is defined more by the use case as well as one of the other habits, defining your license philosophy and or policy. The license model is definitely going to be beneficial here in this aspect. And really it just allows you to focus on your customers, the license models. What are we seeing from the field? What's the requirement? What kind of licensing? And really, how do you want to sell and control the product, the use of the product? What we're seeing most customers doing, of course, they're licensing the application as a whole, or they're doing what we call as feature-based licensing. So every different module or feature can be licensed and possibly even licensed independently. Again, the benefit of the flexible licensing is you can actually mix and match some of these license types. So example, you can have the particular functionality be limited by time, whereas another function is pay-per-use, and you can have those independently controlled by licensing. And of course, that need, with the protect once, deliver many kind of methodology, it doesn't require you to use your precious engineering resources to change a license type. So if you have a unique request coming from the field where they would like to do some sort of user concurrent license or a network-based license, something like that is easy to fulfill and easy to keep that customer happy, without possibly calling in your engineering resources to have to develop a new build, of course, go through the QA process and that entire cycle to be released. The licensing doesn't require the change of the protection, so it's separate from your application binary. And of course, it's looking at some more enterprise-type licensing features. So really, these flexible and unique capabilities, again, just allow you to focus on your customer needs. So if your customer needs something like a license revocation or some sort of redundant licensing, if you're into the server environment, of course you want to make sure you ensure your customers' uptime. Queued licenses, you can always have that. You can do like user licenses, so you can come up with some unique license schemes, as well as utilizing, we do offer on the keys itself in the license system, you have memory, so you can actually define your own licensing if you needed to. So really, again, this the flexible licensing allows you to focus on your customer, as Dave repetitiously mentioned, focus on the use case, focus on the use case. A flexible licensing solution will entail you to do this. And again, just with the the feature-based licensing benefit, a benefit of that if you're not doing that today. And feature-based licensing, again, for anyone, feature is really our terminology. You can think of this as module-based or execution-based, something like that. So every function you have in your application, a function or functionality, you can potentially license those individual functionalities. So like a brief example, if I have a Notepad application, I have print and save as functions. Opposed to just licensing the entire Notepad application, I can license those independent functionalities. And some unique things we're seeing as well in the field. By doing feature-based licensing, you can have different pricing tiers and so forth and things like that. But it really just allows you to meet the need of the field. But a definitely benefit of that is you get to improve the end customer's experience. So if someone has a trialware or a demo version of your application, that's the full version. It's just limited by the license that they're using. So in the instance they purchase the full version from you, they move from demo to full paid version, there's no application install or new software delivery required. So that removes two crucial steps that could potentially delay the fulfillment of that customer and, of course, the customer's use. There's no requirement to do that. You simply send them the new license, as Dave had mentioned, with the activation process, online, offline. However you do accomplish that. Now the customer has a full license, which unlocks those different feature sets. And I just kind of mentioned with a different price, you can have, if you do it at feature-based, you can have a standard feature set, and of course there's a more advanced feature set. Once they pay for that, you simply transmit to them the new license and unlock the new features. And that just really improves the end customer's experience. It doesn't require them to do the add, remove, reinstall, which potentially increases your support calls. So this is one of the main benefit of doing feature-based licensing, and something we're seeing more people taking advantage of today. So that's just, again, from a very high level on the product side. We'll turn it back over to Justin. We can field any questions, anything we have. And I think, Justin, the next slide just kind of touch on the product.
Okay, good. Thanks very much for that. And as Dale just mentioned, please feel free to start submitting your questions now. Just want to give you, again, a high-level overview of our product portfolio and service portfolio. So for customers interested in protecting their applications and or enhancing new ways to sell their applications, we talk about our software licensing products there, software licensing solution, be that either HASP or RMS. If your challenges are less around licensing, either for some reason you don't do licensing or you have third-party or homegrown licensing already and feel like that works inside the product, but your headaches roll around the back office and creating entitlements, knowing who owns what, being able to do updates effectively, track what's happening with your licenses, then you're probably looking at EMS, the second one there, which creates that customer portal and integrates to your back office. Thirdly, certainly a lot of customers we're seeing are big from a hybrid perspective, and they're either looking at rolling out SaaS applications and or have done so already. And we have first to market what we think is some very nice industry leadership around our ability to help you with provisioning SaaS applications, tracking those. I think that one of the funny things I hear is it's a SaaS application, therefore we don't need licensing because we own and run the whole thing, and piracy is an issue for us. Yet the challenges, I think we see a 90% overlap in terms of challenges between the people selling on-premise software and people selling software in the cloud, which is how do I sell features, how do I modularize it, how do I not give everything away, how do I sell it to customers in a way that's effective for them, what if I want a consumer version, an enterprise version, what if I want to have 30-day access or 365-day access. Those are the sorts of things we're tackling. And then lastly, one of the questions before, we have a professional services group that Dave is certainly part of, probably from the front end in terms of defining best practices. We also have a group, individuals in that group that can help build technology modules, integrating us with existing applications you have inside your IT infrastructure, things along those lines. So with that, I'd like to, I'll keep Dave and Dale on the phone and open it up for Q&A. And the first question I have here, Dale, is going to be for you. And the question is, what are the main differences, if any, between having a hard key lock and a soft license? Is one better than the other, or are there any main differences?
All right. Yeah, so great question. So really with the hardware key and the software key, the different locks, the functionality is exactly the same. Of course, we have some differences. We always say that that physical key is going to be more secure because it doesn't rely on the end customer's machine, and that it cannot really be manipulated. Of course, we have differences in the delivery method. So, of course, kind of hard to do ESD with a hardware key. But as far as, the licensing methodologies and those different licensing types, the majority you do have with the same physical key. But some complexities may be much better with the software license. How it really comes down to the customer environment that you're looking to sell in and the kind of process you're looking to enable or manage. But really with the two different keys, there's not much of a difference. As licensing-wise, so for the end customer, they function the exact same. Of course, you do have that tangible difference. You can't plug out and remove that license. But really, it's just that if there's something unique you're doing in your environment, you can share with us, we can work closer with you on that one.
Okay, thanks, Dale. Dale, I'm going to stick with you for the next question. We currently use SuperPro. Is there a network-based solution that allows sharing between multiple physical locations across the country? It also restricts usage to a single concurrent user. Has this been workable in practice? Interesting question. Keep bringing on the questions.
SuperPro, yeah, there's the ability to use SuperPro over the network to enable concurrent usage. And we do have some customers using something like this, so it's available in practice. I would definitely recommend to get in contact with your sales personnel. They can follow up with you on that one and take it further. But that's something you're looking into. But if you're looking at continuing to use hardware keys, more than likely the sales rep would also share with you, the better solutions to continue to go down as well. That's something that as possibly can enable both the standalone as well as the network concurrent environment.
Good. I have one here for Dave. Dave, of your customers implementing EMS, what percentage utilize SafeNet professional services? The question is how many people need help and how many people do it on their own?
That's a good question, by the way. So professional services breaks down for us into two areas, if you will. One is consulting, and that's the planning piece, putting the right plans together to make sure, again, you've captured the right use cases, that you've got a pretty good implementation strategy, that you've thought about how you're going to roll a new license enforcement or maybe a new customer experience out to your customers, that your timelines sort of make sense and are realistic and you're really ready to go. So, on the consulting side, it's, I would say, gosh, maybe about half of our customers at least use some sort of consulting, because again, some of our customers are well entrenched in licensing. They sort of get it. They know what they're doing, and it's merely a matter of of moving away from a homegrown model to just a much better tool. So so most of our customers will engage at least at a high level to get their planning right. On the implementation side, however, we highly encourage our customers to engage with us there, and we can do as little or as much as our customers need, from getting the system simply installed if they're hosting it, installed up and running, getting the product catalogs built, and really jump-starting them in the right direction. So we highly encourage that level of customer service. So I'd say, nearly all on the implementation side at some level, and I would say most on the consulting side as far as planning goes.
Okay, thanks. This one might be for me. Many IT departments are reluctant to install hard keys on their equipment. There's a tendency more towards software keys. So I think there are specific examples for and against. I think the general question is, do we see customers that are utilizing hardware keys that would also like to utilize software keys? And the answer is absolutely. And I think that, that's one of the benefits that we will hear from prospective customers, that if they're on, especially on HASP SRM, that it's relatively easy. 95% of the same, whether they want to do the output as a hardware key or as a self-license. Some general things we'll see is that in certain regions where piracy is higher, there'll be a preference for hard lock keys. In other regions, maybe where piracy is an issue, they like the speed of utilizing a software key. Sometimes if it's the people like the portability of a hardware key from an end user perspective, from a client perspective. If it's server, they may have an issue with having a USB key in there. We try and stay out of, certainly don't have any dog in that fight or any strong religion. Or 95% of our engineering resources are focused on implementing HASP SRM, and probably 5% of our engineering resources split on whether that's going to be in the form factor of the key or in the form factor of an SL that gets delivered out there. So the idea is that you should be able to do both very comfortably with the one application from us. We have one more question. It's kind of also, I don't know if it's a hard one to answer. It says, does HASP-based solution work for VM-based solutions? And certainly we've done webinars on this in the past. Virtual machines are a very big part of the IT landscape now, and they do dramatically impact software licensing, the way that companies license this software, the way they pay for it, the way end users consume it. Within that, there are a number of different variations. So some software companies just try and lock it out. They don't want to let their applications run on virtual machines, period. And then some are looking at ways to accommodate virtual machines and license it that way, but they want to make sure that they're at least licensing a VM. And some are not interested in any restrictions at all. They're just interested in capturing logs and data files that they then can true up and use that for pricing. So, to give a yes or no answer would be misleading. It really depends on how you view the VM world, your space, how it's being used, and what your goals are as a corporation in terms of how you might use HASP and the level of effectiveness that you can get from that. All right, so that, unless there are other questions, and I'll leave it open for maybe 15 more seconds and try and do some sort of radio fill, but that's all the questions that we have for today. It's good timing. I see we're right up in the hour. If you'd like to give us a rating in the application and or constructive comments, we're certainly open to that. But I think at this point we've covered all the questions. And thanks very much, everybody, for their time. Thanks, Dale, and thanks, Dave.
Thank you, everyone.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks a lot, guys.